Mother Bear refused to leave a lone toddler in the forest. What happened next was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The morning mist clung to the forest floor like a ghostly blanket as 3-year-old Maya Chen wandered deeper into the woods. Her tiny fingers clutched a stuffed rabbit, its once white fur now stained with dirt and tears. She had been walking for what felt like hours, though her small legs could barely carry her much further. The towering pine trees seemed to close in around her, their branches creating a canopy so thick that only scattered beams of sunlight managed to break through. Maya's parents, David and Lin Chen, had brought her on what was supposed to be a simple family camping trip. They had set up their tent near the edge of Blackwood Forest, a place known for its breathtaking views and peaceful hiking trails. But Maya had woken up early that morning, drawn by the sound of chirping birds and the mysterious rustling of leaves. While her parents slept, she had slipped out of the tent, following a colorful butterfly that danced just beyond her reach. Now, hours later, Maya was completely lost. Her small voice called out for her mommy and daddy, but the forest seemed to swallow her words. The deeper she went, the quieter everything became. Even the birds had stopped singing. She stumbled over a fallen branch and fell to her knees, scraping her palms against rough bark. Tears began to flow down her chubby cheeks as she realized she didn't know which way to go. "Mama," she whispered, hugging her stuffed rabbit tighter. The forest around her felt alive, watching her every move. Strange sounds echoed from somewhere behind the trees, the snap of twigs, the rustle of bushes, something moving through the undergrowth. What Maya didn't know was that she was being watched. About 50 yards away, hidden behind a cluster of thick oak trees, a massive brown bear stood perfectly still. The bear's name was Coda, though no human knew this. She was a mother herself, with a 6-month-old cub named Nico who stayed close to her side. Coda had been foraging for berries when she first caught the scent of the human child. Every instinct told Coda to take her cub and move away from the area. Humans meant danger, but something about this tiny human was different. The child wasn't making loud noises or aggressive movements like the adult humans who sometimes invaded their territory. This one seemed lost, afraid, and completely helpless. Coda watched as Maya struggled to stand up after her fall. The bear's keen senses picked up the salt of tears, the rapid beating of a frightened heart, and something else, the sweet, innocent smell that all young creatures carried. It was the same scent that had drawn her to protect Nico when he was born. Her maternal instincts, so powerful and deep, began to stir in a way she had never experienced with a human before. Nico, curious about the strange sounds, poked his small black nose around his mother's massive leg. He let out a soft whimper, asking in his own way what they were looking at. Coda gently nudged him back with her snout, but her eyes never left Maya. The little girl had managed to get back on her feet and was now walking in circles, clearly confused about which direction to take. She called out again, her voice breaking with exhaustion and fear. "Daddy, where are you? I'm scared." That's when Coda made a decision that would change everything. Instead of retreating deeper into the forest with Nico, she began to move closer to Maya. Her massive paws made almost no sound on the forest floor, a skill learned through years of hunting and survival. But she wasn't hunting now. Something deep inside her chest was pulling her toward this lost child, something she couldn't understand or fight against. Maya suddenly stopped walking and turned around. Through her tears, she saw a large, dark shape moving between the trees. At first, she thought it might be her father coming to find her. But as the shape got closer, she realized it was much too big to be Daddy, much too big to be any person at all. Coda emerged from behind the trees, and for a moment both the bear and the child stood frozen, staring at each other. Maya's eyes grew wide with wonder rather than fear. She had seen bears in picture books but never imagined they were so huge and beautiful. Coda's brown fur caught the filtered sunlight, making her look almost golden. "Big doggy," Maya whispered, not understanding what she was really looking at. She took a small step forward, still clutching her stuffed rabbit. Coda's heart began to race, but not from fear or aggression. The child's innocent reaction awakened something primal within her. She had expected screaming, running, panic. Instead, this tiny human was looking at her with the same trusting eyes that Nico used when he was hungry or scared. Behind Coda, little Nico finally gathered enough courage to peek around his mother's leg. When he saw Maya, his own curiosity got the better of him. He let out a small, playful sound that was almost like a bark. Maya giggled at the noise, clapping her hands together. "Baby doggy, too!" she exclaimed with delight. The sound of Maya's laughter did something unexpected to Coda. It reminded her of the joy she felt when Nico played and explored the world around him. This human child, lost and afraid, was still capable of finding happiness in meeting new creatures. It showed a pureness of spirit that Coda recognized and respected. Slowly, carefully, Coda began to move closer to Maya. Every step was deliberate and gentle. She lowered her massive head slightly, making herself seem less intimidating. Her brown eyes, warm and intelligent, never left Maya's face. Maya, unaware of any danger, began walking toward Coda as well. Her little legs moved with the unsteady gait of a toddler who had been walking for too long. When she was about 10 feet away from the bear, she stumbled again and fell forward. Without thinking, Coda lunged forward and caught Maya gently with her snout, preventing the child from hitting the ground hard. The contact sent a shock through both of them. Maya felt the warm, soft fur against her cheek, while Coda felt the tiny heartbeat of the vulnerable creature she had just protected. "Thank you, big doggy," Maya said softly, reaching up to pat Coda's nose with her small hand. At that moment, something extraordinary happened. Coda felt a bond form between herself and this lost human child that defied everything she had ever known about the natural order of the forest. Maya wasn't prey, wasn't a threat, wasn't an enemy. She was simply a young one who needed protection, and Coda's maternal instincts had claimed her as surely as if she were her own cub. Nico, seeing his mother's acceptance of the strange new creature, bounded forward to investigate Maya more closely. He sniffed at her shoes, her clothes, and her stuffed rabbit, his tail wagging with excitement. Maya giggled again and gently petted Nico's head, causing the cub to roll over playfully. As the three unlikely companions sat together in the forest clearing, none of them realized that Maya's parents had discovered her missing and were already organizing a massive search party. The real adventure was just about to begin. Meanwhile, back at the campsite, David Chen had woken up to find his wife Lynn frantically searching through their tent. Her hands shook as she threw sleeping bags and camping gear aside, calling Maya's name in a voice that grew more desperate with each passing second. "She's not here, David. Maya's gone." Lynn's voice cracked as she stumbled out of the tent, her dark hair messy from sleep, her eyes wide with terror. She wore only her pajamas and slippers, but she didn't care about the cold morning air biting at her skin. David shot up from his sleeping bag, instantly alert. "What do you mean gone?" "She was right here between us when we went to sleep." He quickly threw on his jacket and boots, his mind racing through all the terrible possibilities. "Maya! Maya, where are you?" They searched around their campsite first, calling her name over and over. Lynn checked behind every tree, under every bush, while David looked inside their car, hoping maybe Maya had crawled in there to play. But there was no sign of their little girl anywhere. "The zipper on the tent," Lynn whispered, pointing with a trembling finger. "Look, David, it's open just enough for a small child to squeeze through." David's heart sank as he realized what had happened. Maya must have woken up early and decided to explore on her own. She had always been curious, always drawn to new sights and sounds, but here in the wilderness, that curiosity could be deadly. "We need to call for help," David said, pulling out his cell phone. But the screen showed no signal bars. They were too deep in the forest, too far from civilization. "Lynn, stay here in case she comes back. I'm going to drive to the ranger station." "No." Lynn grabbed his arm with both hands, her grip so tight it hurt. "I'm not staying here alone. What if she comes back and we're both gone? What if something happens to you too?" Tears were streaming down her face now, and her whole body was shaking. David pulled his wife into his arms, feeling her fear match his own. Okay, we'll go together, but first, let me try to follow her trail." He knelt down near the tent opening and examined the soft earth. There, barely visible in the dirt, were tiny footprints leading away from their campsite and into the dense forest. The prints were small and uneven, showing that Maya had been walking slowly, probably still half asleep when she first wandered off. "She went this way," David said, pointing toward a path that disappeared between towering pine trees. "The footprints are fresh. She can't have gotten too far." But as they followed Maya's trail deeper into the woods, the footprints became harder and harder to see. The ground grew rockier, covered with fallen leaves and pine needles that showed no trace of their daughter's passing. After 30 minutes of searching, they lost the trail completely. "Maya!" Lynn screamed so loudly that birds flew out of nearby trees. "Please, baby, answer Mommy!" Her voice echoed through the forest, but the only response was the whisper of wind through the branches. David wrapped his arm around Lynn's shoulders, trying to stay strong for both of them, but inside he was breaking apart with worry. Back in the forest clearing, Maya was completely unaware of her parents' panic. She had found a comfortable spot between Koda's massive paws, using the bear's warm fur as a backrest while she played with Nico. The cub had brought her small sticks and colorful leaves, dropping them in her lap like gifts. "You're so nice," Maya told Koda, patting the bear's leg with her tiny hand. "Are you my friend now?" Koda responded with a low, gentle rumble deep in her throat. It wasn't quite a growl, but rather the same soothing sound she made when Nico was upset or scared. Maya found the sound comforting, like a giant cat purring. But Koda's keen hearing had picked up something that worried her. In the distance, she could hear human voices calling out. They sounded distressed, urgent. Her experience with humans told her that where there were voices, there would soon be many people, possibly with loud machines and weapons. The bear's protective instincts kicked into high gear, but now she faced a terrible dilemma. Every fiber of her being told her to take Nico and run as far away from the approaching humans as possible. But looking down at Maya, who was now dozing peacefully against her warm fur, Koda couldn't bring herself to abandon the child. Maya was so small, so helpless. If Koda left her here alone, the little girl might wander even deeper into the forest. There were other dangers out there: wolves, mountain lions, deep ravines, and freezing streams. Maya wouldn't survive a night alone in the wilderness. Nico sensed his mother's tension and pressed closer to her side, making a small whimpering sound. He didn't understand why they weren't moving away from the human sounds like they always did before. Koda made another decision that went against every survival instinct she possessed. She would stay with Maya until the child was safe, even if it meant putting herself and Nico in danger. As if sensing the bear's resolve, Maya stirred in her sleep and opened her eyes. She looked up at Coda with complete trust, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, crumpled granola bar, the last of her snacks from the camping trip. "Are you hungry?" Maya asked, unwrapping the bar with her small fingers. She broke it in half, offering the larger piece to Coda. "Mama says sharing is nice." Coda had never been offered food by a human before. In her world, humans either ran away screaming or tried to drive her off with loud noises and thrown objects. But this tiny human was treating her like family, like someone worthy of kindness and care. The bear gently took the granola bar from Maya's outstretched hand, her massive teeth carefully avoiding the child's fingers. She ate it slowly, savoring not just the taste, but the gesture behind it. Maya clapped her hands happily, delighted that her new friend had accepted her gift. "Good doggy," Maya said, giving Coda another pat. Then she offered the remaining half of the granola bar to Nico, who sniffed it curiously before gobbling it up in one bite. What Maya didn't know was that her simple act of sharing had just sealed a bond that would change all of their lives forever. In the bear world, sharing food was a sign of family, of belonging to the same pack. By offering her food to Coda and Nico, Maya had unknowingly declared herself part of their family. And Coda, with her ancient wisdom and powerful maternal instincts, had accepted. The distant voices were getting closer now. Coda could hear the heavy footsteps of multiple humans crashing through the underbrush, their panic making them loud and clumsy. She stood up slowly, careful not to disturb Maya, who was still sitting between her paws. "Where are we going?" Maya asked, looking up at the massive bear towering over her. Coda looked down at the child, then at her own cub, and made a decision that would shock everyone involved. Instead of fleeing from the approaching search party, she was going to lead Maya toward them. But she would do it her way, on her terms, ensuring the safety of all three of them. The bear gently nudged Maya with her snout, encouraging the child to stand up. Maya giggled and got to her feet, automatically reaching out to hold on to Coda's thick fur for balance. Nico bounced around them both, excited by this new game. "Are we going on an adventure?" Maya asked, her eyes bright with curiosity instead of fear. Coda began walking slowly through the trees, staying close enough to Maya that the child could keep up with her short legs. Every few steps the bear would pause and listen, her ears swiveling to track the sounds of the search party. She was leading them all toward a meeting that none of the humans could possibly expect. Behind them, the voices grew louder and more frantic. David and Lynn had been joined by other campers who had heard about the missing child. There were now 8 adults combing through the forest, calling Maya's name and beating the bushes with long sticks. "Maya, please, sweetheart, call out to Daddy." David's voice was hoarse from shouting, and his hands were bleeding from pushing through thorny branches. Lynn stumbled along beside him, tears streaming down her face, her pajamas torn and dirty. What if we never find her? What if something terrible has already happened? "Don't think like that," David said firmly, though his own heart was filled with the same dark fears. "She's smart, Lynn. She's our brave little girl. She's probably just playing somewhere, waiting for us to find her." But as the morning wore on and there was still no sign of Maya, both parents began to fear the worst. The forest seemed endless, full of 1,000 places where a small child could be lost forever. What they didn't know was that at that very moment, their daughter was safe and protected, walking hand in paw with the most unlikely guardian angel they could ever imagine. And this guardian angel was about to reveal herself in a way that would leave everyone speechless. Coda suddenly stopped walking and raised her massive head, sniffing the air. The human scents were very close now, perhaps only a few hundred yards away. She could smell their fear, their desperation, their love for the small child walking beside her. Maya noticed that Coda had stopped and looked up at her questioningly. "What's wrong, big doggy?" Instead of answering, Coda did something that would haunt and amaze everyone who witnessed it for the rest of their lives. She opened her mouth and let out a deep, booming call that echoed through the entire forest. It wasn't a roar of aggression or a warning to stay away. It was a call of communication, a sound that said, "Here. Come here. What you're looking for is here." The sound froze every member of the search party in their tracks. Bears didn't call out to humans. Bears avoided humans at all costs. But this call seemed almost purposeful, almost like it was trying to tell them something. "Did you hear that?" David whispered to Lynn, his hand instinctively reaching for hers. "It came from over there." Lynn pointed toward a thick grove of pine trees about 200 yards to their left. "But David, that was a bear. What if Maya ... She couldn't finish the sentence. The possibility was too horrible to even speak aloud. But Maya, hearing the familiar voices of her parents in the distance, suddenly understood what was happening. Her mommy and daddy were looking for her. She cupped her small hands around her mouth and called back with all the strength her little lungs could muster. "Mama, Daddy, I'm here. I'm with the nice doggies." The sound of their daughter's voice, alive and apparently unharmed, sent both parents running toward the sound with a speed born of pure love and desperation. Behind them, the other members of the search party followed, their hearts pounding with a mixture of relief and terror. What they were all about to witness would challenge everything they thought they knew about the natural world, about the relationship between humans and wild animals, and about the mysterious power of innocence to bridge even the most impossible gaps. David crashed through the underbrush first, his heart hammering so hard he could barely breathe. Branches tore at his clothes and scratched his face, but he didn't feel any pain. All he could think about was reaching Maya, holding her in his arms, making sure she was safe. Lynn was right behind him, her maternal instincts giving her strength she didn't know she possessed. But when they burst into the small clearing where the voices had come from, both parents stopped dead in their tracks. The scene before them was so impossible, so completely beyond anything they could have imagined, that their minds struggled to process what they were seeing. There, sitting calmly in a patch of dappled sunlight, was their 3-year-old daughter. She was cross-legged on the forest floor, her stuffed rabbit in her lap, looking perfectly content and unharmed. But she wasn't alone. Towering over Maya like a massive, protective shadow was the largest brown bear either parent had ever seen. The bear had to weigh at least 400 pounds, with claws longer than a man's fingers and teeth that could crush bones. But the most shocking thing wasn't the bear's size. It was the way she was positioned. Coda was standing directly behind Maya, her massive body forming a living shield between the child and any potential danger. Her head was lowered, and her dark brown eyes were fixed on the approaching humans with an expression that was alert but not aggressive. She looked like a guardian, a protector, a mother watching over her young. And beside Maya, tumbling playfully in the grass, was a bear cub that couldn't have been more than 6 months old. The cub was rolling over and over while Maya giggled and clapped her hands at his antics. "Maya," David whispered, his voice barely audible. He was afraid that speaking too loudly might startle the bears and trigger an attack. Maya looked up at the sound of her father's voice, and her face lit up with pure joy. "Daddy! Mommy!" She started to stand up, but Coda gently placed one massive paw on the child's shoulder, keeping her seated. It wasn't a threatening gesture. It was protective, almost tender. "I made new friends," Maya announced proudly, as if she were introducing her parents to children from the playground. "This is Mama Bear and her baby. They're really nice. Mama Bear shared my snack with me." Lynn felt her knees go weak. Her daughter was sitting inches away from a wild bear and her cub, talking about them like they were family pets. Every instinct screamed at her to rush forward and grab Maya, but something in the bear's posture made her hesitate. The other members of the search party had caught up now, and they formed a semicircle around the clearing, all of them staring in stunned silence at the impossible scene. Tom Morrison, a local park ranger who had joined the search, slowly reached for the radio clipped to his belt. "Don't," David said quietly, not taking his eyes off the bear. No sudden movements, no loud noises. But Tom had already seen something that profoundly disturbed him. "That's not normal behavior," he whispered to the others. "Bears don't do this. They don't stay with human children. They don't position themselves protectively. Something's wrong with this picture." What Tom didn't understand was that nothing was wrong. Something was extraordinarily right. Coda had claimed Maya as her own, and she would defend the child with her life if necessary. The bear's maternal instincts had overridden millions of years of evolution, creating a bond that transcended species. Maya, oblivious to the tension in the air, continued chattering happily. "Mama Bear caught me when I fell down, and Baby Bear brought me pretty leaves. Look." She held up a small collection of colorful autumn leaves that Nico had gathered for her. "And we shared food," Maya continued, reaching into her pocket and pulling out a few crumbs from the granola bar. "Mama says sharing is good. Mama Bear liked it." At the mention of sharing food, Coda's ears perked up. She remembered the taste of that granola bar, but more importantly, she remembered the trust and love behind the gesture. This small human had accepted her and Nico as family, and Coda would honor that bond no matter what. Lynn took a small, careful step forward. "Maya, sweetheart, can you come to Mommy now?" But before Maya could move, Coda stepped protectively in front of the child, blocking Lynn's path. The bear's message was clear. Maya was under her protection now, and she wouldn't let anyone, even the child's own parents, put her in danger. "She won't let me take her," Lynn said, tears streaming down her face. "The bear won't let me take my own daughter." David's mind was racing, trying to figure out how to resolve this impossible situation. "Maya, are you hurt? Are you scared?" "No, Daddy, I'm not scared. Mama Bear is keeping me safe." Maya reached up and patted Coda's massive leg. "She's warm and soft, and she makes nice sounds when I pet her." To demonstrate, Maya ran her small hand along Coda's fur, and the bear responded with that same low, rumbling sound, a cross between a purr and a gentle growl. It was a sound of contentment, of family, of belonging. Tom Morrison had never seen anything like it in his 20 years as a park ranger. "I need to call this in," he said, reaching for his radio again. "We need wildlife experts, maybe a tranquilizer gun." "No!" The sharp command came from an unexpected source, Maya herself. "Don't hurt my friends. They're good. They didn't do anything bad." The 3-year-old's fierce defense of the bears sent a chill through all the adults present. Maya had formed a bond with these wild animals that was deeper than anyone could have imagined. But the situation was about to become even more complicated. From somewhere deep in the forest came another sound. A low, threatening growl that made everyone's blood run cold. This wasn't the gentle rumbling that Coda made. This was the sound of aggression, of a predator ready to attack. Coda's head snapped up, her ears pointing toward the sound. Every muscle in her massive body tensed, and for the first time since the humans had arrived, she looked truly dangerous. She knew that growl. It belonged to Brutus, a massive male bear who had been trying to claim her territory for months. Brutus was bigger than Coda, meaner, and completely unpredictable. He had killed cubs before, sometimes even his own offspring when he was in a rage. And now he was approaching the clearing, drawn by the scent of humans and the sound of voices. Maya felt the change in Coda's posture and looked up with concern. "What's wrong, Mama Bear?" Before anyone could react, Brutus emerged from the tree line on the opposite side of the clearing. He was enormous, easily 600 pounds of muscle and fury. His dark fur was scarred from countless fights, and his small, black eyes burned with territorial rage. When Brutus saw the humans, he reared up on his hind legs, standing nearly 8 feet tall. His roar shook the trees and sent birds fleeing in all directions. This was what the search party had feared when they first heard a bear call. This was the nightmare scenario they had imagined. But what happened next shocked everyone, including Brutus himself. Coda immediately moved to place herself between the aggressive male and Maya. She reared up to her full height, matching Brutus's intimidating posture, and let out a roar of her own, a sound that spoke of maternal fury and absolute determination. She was telling Brutus in no uncertain terms that he would have to go through her to get to the child. "Oh my God," Lynn whispered, grabbing David's arm. "There are 2 of them now." Maya, caught between 2 massive bears, did something that would be talked about for years to come. Instead of screaming or crying, she stood up and walked calmly to Coda's side, placing her tiny hand on the bear's massive paw. "It's okay, Mama Bear," she said in her sweet, innocent voice. "I'm not scared. You'll keep me safe." The absolute trust in Maya's voice, her complete faith in Coda's protection, seemed to give the mother bear strength she didn't know she possessed. Coda's roar became even louder, more fierce, more determined. Brutus, confused by this unprecedented situation, dropped back to all fours and circled the clearing, trying to understand what was happening. He had never seen a mother bear defend a human child before. It went against every natural instinct, every rule of the wild. The standoff continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. 2 massive bears facing each other across a small clearing, with a 3-year-old child and 8 terrified adults caught in the middle. Then Maya did something that would change everything once again. She looked directly at Brutus and spoke to him in the same gentle voice she had used with Coda and Nico. "Hi there, Big Bear. Are you lost too? Are you looking for your family?" Brutus stopped circling and stared at the tiny human who had just addressed him without fear. In all his years in the forest, no human had ever spoken to him with anything but terror or aggression. This small creature was treating him like she had treated Coda, with respect, with kindness, with the assumption that he was capable of goodness. The massive male bear tilted his head, studying Maya with curiosity rather than rage. Her scent was mixed with Coda's now, marking her as part of the bear family. But there was something else about this child, something that called to the gentler instincts that Brutus had buried long ago. "You're really big," Maya continued, taking a small step toward him. "But you have kind eyes just like Mama Bear." Coda tensed, ready to spring into action if Brutus made any aggressive move toward Maya. But something extraordinary was happening. The child's innocent words, her fearless approach, her pure heart. It was having the same effect on Brutus that it had on Coda. The scarred old bear slowly lowered himself to the ground, making himself less intimidating. His territorial aggression was melting away, replaced by something he hadn't felt in years, the desire to protect rather than destroy. David and Lynn watched in amazement as their daughter approached the second bear with the same trust she had shown the first. "Maya, please be careful," Lynn whispered, though she knew her words were useless. Maya was operating on a level that adults couldn't understand, communicating with the bears through pure emotion and instinct. "Are you hungry?" Maya asked Brutus, reaching into her pocket. She pulled out a small piece of lint and a tiny pebble, the only things left in her pocket besides the granola bar crumbs. "I don't have much food left, but I can share." She held out the pebble to Brutus, offering it with the same generosity she had shown Coda. To everyone's amazement, the massive bear gently took the pebble in his mouth, then dropped it at Maya's feet, a gesture of acceptance and friendship. "Good bear," Maya said, patting Brutus on the nose. "You can be friends with Mama Bear and Baby Bear too. We can all be a family." At that moment, Tom Morrison realized he was witnessing something that would rewrite everything scientists thought they knew about animal behavior. These bears weren't just tolerating a human child. They were actively protecting her, accepting her, treating her as one of their own. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. As Maya stood between the two massive bears, petting them both with her small hands, Nico the cub did something that made everyone gasp. The baby bear walked over to Maya and gently took the hem of her shirt in his mouth. Then, very carefully, he began to tug her toward the edge of the clearing, not away from the humans, but toward them. Nico was trying to return Maya to her parents. Coda watched her cub's actions and seemed to understand what he was doing. After a moment of hesitation, she began to move in the same direction, gently nudging Maya forward with her massive head. Even Brutus, the scarred and aggressive male who had never shown kindness to anyone, began to follow. The three bears were working together to reunite Maya with her family. But as they approached the line of humans, something unexpected happened that would turn this miraculous reunion into an even more incredible story. Maya suddenly stopped walking and turned back to look at her bear friends. Tears were streaming down her small face as she realized what was happening. "Are you leaving me now?" she asked Coda, her voice breaking with emotion. "Don't you want to be my family anymore?" The question hit Coda like a physical blow. She could see the pain in Maya's eyes, could smell the salt of her tears, could feel the child's heartbreak as if it were her own. This small human had given her something she had never experienced before: unconditional love and acceptance. And now Maya thought she was being abandoned again. Coda made a decision that would shock everyone present and create a situation that no one could have prepared for. Instead of pushing Maya toward her parents and then retreating into the forest, she sat down right where she was and refused to move. She would not abandon Maya. She would not break the bond that had formed between them. If the humans wanted their child back, they would have to accept that Maya now belonged to two families, her human family and her bear family, and she would fight anyone who tried to separate them permanently. The standoff that followed would test everyone's understanding of love, family, and the mysterious connections that can form between the most unlikely creatures. What happened next would make headlines around the world and challenge everything people thought they knew about the relationship between humans and the wild. For 20 minutes, nobody moved. The bears remained protectively positioned around Maya, while the humans stood frozen at the edge of the clearing, afraid that any sudden movement might trigger a catastrophic chain of events. Maya sat cross-legged between Coda and Brutus, completely oblivious to the tension surrounding her, singing a soft lullaby that her grandmother had taught her. The song drifted through the forest air like a gentle prayer, and its effect on the bears was remarkable. Coda's breathing became slower and more relaxed, while Brutus, who had never heard human music before, tilted his massive head as if trying to understand this strange and beautiful sound. Even little Nico had stopped playing and was listening intently, his small ears perked forward. David was the first to break the silence. "Maya, sweetheart, Mommy and Daddy need to take you home now. We were so worried about you." But when Maya looked up at her father, her response shocked everyone present. "I don't want to go home without my bear family. They'll be lonely without me." Lynn felt her heart breaking as she watched her daughter's fierce loyalty to these wild animals. "Maya, bears can't live with people. They belong in the forest." "But they saved me," Maya protested, tears welling up in her eyes again. "When I was lost and scared, Mama Bear found me. She kept me warm and safe, and Baby Bear played with me so I wouldn't cry. And Big Bear," she pointed to Brutus, "he's not mean like everyone thinks. He's just sad because he doesn't have a family." The last comment made everyone look at Brutus with new eyes. The massive bear, who had been feared and avoided by every human in the area, was indeed sitting peacefully beside a 3-year-old child, allowing her to pet his scarred fur without showing any sign of aggression. Tom Morrison was frantically trying to radio for backup, but his equipment kept producing nothing but static. They were too deep in the forest, too far from any cell towers or radio repeaters. "We're completely on our own out here," he whispered to David, "and I have no idea how to handle this situation." That's when Dr. Sarah Williams stepped forward. She was a wildlife biologist who had been camping nearby and had joined the search party when she heard about the missing child. Unlike the others, she wasn't looking at the scene with fear. She was studying it with scientific fascination. "This is unprecedented," she said quietly, pulling out a small notebook and pen. "I need to document everything that's happening here. The behavior we're witnessing could revolutionize our understanding of interspecies bonding." "Document it later," David snapped. "Right now, we need to get my daughter away from those bears." "Actually," Dr. Williams said carefully, "I think the bears might be the key to resolving this peacefully. Look at their body language. They're not displaying any signs of aggression or stress. They're completely relaxed, completely focused on protecting Maya. If we try to force a separation, we could trigger a defensive response that would be dangerous for everyone." As if to prove her point, Maya suddenly stood up and walked over to where her parents were standing, but she didn't run into their arms as they expected. Instead, she stopped about 10 feet away and crossed her arms in a gesture of stubborn determination that was all too familiar to David and Lynn. "I'm not leaving my bear family," she announced. "If you want me to come with you, they have to come too." The absurdity of the demand might have been amusing under different circumstances, but right now it represented an impossible problem. How do you explain to a 3-year-old that wild bears can't come home for dinner? "Maya, bears are wild animals," Lynn said gently. "They can't live in houses or ride in cars. They need to stay in the forest where they belong." "Then I'll stay in the forest too," Maya replied with the absolute certainty that only a toddler can possess. "I can live here with them. Mama Bear will teach me how to find food, and Baby Bear can be my brother." Behind Maya, Coda seemed to understand the conversation, even though she couldn't comprehend the words. The bear could sense the conflict, could smell the emotional distress of everyone involved. She stood up and walked slowly toward the group of humans, stopping just a few feet away from David and Lynn. What happened next left everyone speechless. Coda carefully reached out with one massive paw and gently touched David's hand. The contact lasted only a second, but the message was clear. She was acknowledging him as Maya's father, showing him respect as the alpha of Maya's human pack. Then she did the same thing to Lynn, touching the frightened mother's trembling fingers with the same gentle care she showed to Maya. It was a gesture of understanding, of shared parenthood, of mutual love for the child they both wanted to protect. "She's trying to communicate with us," Dr. Williams whispered in amazement. "She's attempting to establish a pack relationship that includes both human and bear families." But the situation was about to become even more complex. From the direction they had come, they could hear the distant sound of engines, vehicles racing through the forest roads. Word had somehow gotten out about the missing child and the bear encounter, and help was on the way. Unfortunately, the kind of help that was coming might not be helpful at all. Tom Morrison's face went pale as he recognized the sound. That's the State Wildlife Department. They'll have tranquilizer guns, maybe even rifles. If they see bears this close to a child. He didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone understood the implications. The arriving officers would see the situation as a threat to be neutralized, not a miracle to be preserved. Maya, hearing the approaching vehicles, looked around nervously. She might not understand all the adult conversations happening around her, but she could sense that something bad was about to happen to her bear friends. "Are those bad people coming?" she asked, moving protectively in front of Nico. "Are they going to hurt my family?" Coda's acute hearing had already picked up the sound of the approaching vehicles, and her reaction was immediate and alarming. She moved quickly to position herself between Maya and the direction of the sounds, while Brutus rose to his full height and let out a warning growl that echoed through the trees. "We need to do something," David said urgently. "If those officers arrive and see this scene, they're going to assume the worst." Dr. Williams was thinking frantically, trying to come up with a solution that would protect both Maya and the bears. "There might be a way," she said slowly, "but it would require everyone here to work together, and it would mean taking some serious risks. What do you have in mind?" Lynn asked, desperation clear in her voice. "We need to convince the authorities that the bears aren't a threat," Dr. Williams explained. "And the only way to do that is to demonstrate the bond that's formed between Maya and these animals. We need to show them what we've witnessed." "You want to use my daughter as bait?" David's voice was sharp with anger. "No, I want to use the truth, Doctor," Williams replied firmly. "Maya isn't in danger from these bears. She's being protected by them. If we can document that, if we can prove that this is a peaceful situation, we might be able to prevent a tragedy." The sound of engines was getting closer now. They had maybe 5 minutes before the wildlife officers arrived with their tranquilizer guns and protocols for dealing with dangerous bear encounters. Maya, sensing the urgency in the adult voices around her, made a decision that once again demonstrated her remarkable courage and wisdom. She walked over to where Dr. Williams was standing and tugged on the woman's jacket. "Lady, can you help my bear family?" she asked, looking up with those innocent eyes that had already won over 3 wild bears. "I don't want anyone to hurt them. They're good bears. They just love me." Dr. Williams knelt down to Maya's level, struck by the child's maturity and compassion. "I'll try, sweetheart, but I need you to help me show the other people that your bear friends are safe to be around. Can you do that?" Maya nodded solemnly. "I can do that. Mama Bear and Big Bear and Baby Bear trust me. I'll show everyone how nice they are." What happened over the next few minutes would be recorded by Dr. Williams's emergency video camera and would later become one of the most viewed wildlife documentaries in history. Maya walked calmly back to where the 3 bears were waiting. She sat down between Coda and Brutus, then patted the ground beside her, inviting them to join her. All 3 bears immediately complied, arranging themselves in a protective circle around the tiny girl. "This is my family," Maya announced, speaking directly to Dr. Williams' camera. "This is Mama Bear. She found me when I was lost and scared. She kept me warm and gave me hugs. And this is Baby Bear. He played with me and brought me pretty things. And this is Big Bear. Everyone thinks he's mean, but he's really just lonely. He needs someone to love him." As Maya spoke, she petted each bear in turn. and their responses were captured clearly on video. Coda leaned into the child's touch, making that gentle rumbling sound. Nico rolled over playfully, allowing Maya to scratch his belly. And most remarkably, Brutus, the scarred, feared, aggressive male who had terrorized this part of the forest for years, closed his eyes and sighed contentedly as Maya's small hand stroked his massive head. "See?" Maya continued, looking directly into the camera. "They're not scary. They're just big teddy bears who want to be loved." The sound of car doors slamming echoed through the forest. The wildlife officers had arrived, and they were heading toward the clearing with purpose and determination. But Dr. Williams had captured something on video that would change how everyone viewed the situation. She had documented proof that Maya wasn't a victim. She was a bridge between two worlds, a living example of the power of love to overcome even the most fundamental barriers. As the first officer appeared at the edge of the clearing, weapon drawn and ready for a dangerous bear encounter, he stopped dead in his tracks. The scene before him was nothing like what he had expected. There was no frightened child being menaced by wild animals. Instead, he saw a little girl sitting peacefully with 3 bears, all of them calm and relaxed, all of them focused on protecting and caring for each other. Officer Jake Martinez had been dealing with problem bears for 15 years, and he had never seen anything remotely like this. His training told him to tranquilize the bears immediately and extract the child, but his eyes told him a different story entirely. "What the hell is going on here?" he called out to Tom Morrison, not taking his eyes off the incredible scene in front of him. Before Tom could answer, Maya looked up and waved cheerfully at the new arrival. "Hi there. Are you here to meet my bear family too? They're really nice if you're nice to them." Officer Martinez felt his world shift on its axis. In all his years of wildlife management, he had operated under the assumption that bears and humans were natural enemies, that peaceful coexistence was impossible. But this 3-year-old child was proving everything he believed to be wrong. Behind him, 2 more officers emerged from the trees, followed by a veterinarian carrying a tranquilizer rifle. They all stopped at the sight of Maya sitting calmly between the massive bears. "Sir," one of the officers whispered, "what are your orders? The child appears to be unharmed, but she's in immediate proximity to 3 brown bears. Standard protocol calls for immediate neutralization of the threat." Officer Martinez looked at the scene again, studying the body language of both the child and the animals. Everything he was seeing contradicted his training, contradicted his experience, contradicted everything he thought he knew about bear behavior. "Hold your position," he said finally. "Nobody moves, nobody shoots, nobody does anything until I figure out what's happening here." Maya, overhearing the conversation, stood up and walked toward the officers with the same fearless confidence she had shown throughout this entire adventure. Behind her, all 3 bears immediately rose and followed, maintaining their protective formation around her. "Please, don't hurt my friends," Maya said, looking up at Officer Martinez with tears in her eyes. "They saved my life. They kept me safe when I was lost. They're good bears." The sight of this tiny child standing protectively in front of 3 wild bears, pleading for their lives, was unlike anything Officer Martinez had ever encountered. He holstered his weapon and knelt down to Maya's level. "Sweetheart, can you tell me what happened? How did you end up with these bears?" Maya launched into her story, describing how she had gotten lost, how Coda had found her and protected her, how they had shared food and become a family. As she spoke, the bears remained calm and watchful, clearly understanding that this human was not a threat. When Maya finished her story, Officer Martinez looked around at the assembled group of adults, all of whom nodded to confirm that the child's account was accurate. "This is impossible," he said quietly. "Bears don't adopt human children. They don't form interspecies family bonds. This goes against everything we know about their behavior." Dr. Williams stepped forward with her video camera. "Officer Martinez, I've documented everything that's happened here. What we're witnessing is unprecedented, but it's real. These bears have formed a genuine family bond with this child, and they're not going to abandon her willingly." As if to prove her point, Maya suddenly yawned and rubbed her eyes. The excitement and emotion of the day were finally catching up with her. Without hesitation, Coda lowered herself to the ground and gently nudged Maya toward her warm, furry side. "I'm sleepy," Maya announced, curling up against Coda like she was snuggling with a giant teddy bear. "Can we take a nap?" Within seconds, Maya was fast asleep, her small body rising and falling with the rhythm of Coda's breathing. Nico curled up on her other side, while Brutus positioned himself as a sentinel, watching for any potential threats. The image of a 3-year-old child sleeping peacefully between 3 wild bears would become one of the most iconic photographs in the history of human-animal relationships. But for everyone standing in that forest clearing, it posed an immediate and unprecedented problem. How do you wake up a child from a nap when she's sleeping between a mother bear and a 600-pound male who have claimed her as family? And more importantly, what do you do when you realize that separating them might break not just human hearts, but bear hearts as well? The answer to those questions would require a solution that no wildlife manual had ever contemplated, and it would test the limits of compassion, understanding, and love in ways that would surprise everyone involved. As Maya slept peacefully between her bear guardians, Officer Martinez found himself facing the most difficult decision of his career. Standard protocol was clear: tranquilize the bears, extract the child, relocate the animals to a distant part of the forest or a wildlife sanctuary. But looking at the serene scene before him, he realized that following protocol would destroy something extraordinary and irreplaceable. "Dr. Williams," he said quietly, "in your professional opinion, what would happen if we forcibly separated them?" Dr. Williams looked at the sleeping child and the protective bears surrounding her. "Based on what I've observed, the trauma could be devastating for all parties involved. Maya has formed what appears to be a genuine family bond with these animals. Forcible separation could cause lasting psychological damage. And the bears? Bears are highly intelligent, emotional creatures. Coda has clearly adopted Maya as her own cub. Removing the child could trigger a grief response that might make her dangerous to humans in the future. As for Brutus..." She paused, studying the massive male bear who was standing guard over the sleeping child. "His transformation has been the most remarkable. He's gone from being a territorial, aggressive loner to a protective family member. If we break this bond, we might be creating the very monster we were trying to prevent." Lin Chen, who had been listening to this conversation, felt her maternal instincts warring with each other. Part of her wanted to rush forward and grab Maya, to take her daughter away from these wild animals and never look back. But another part of her recognized the profound peace on Maya's face as she slept, the complete trust and security she felt with her unlikely family. "There has to be another way," Lin whispered to David. "Look at her. I've never seen Maya sleep so soundly, even in her own bed. She feels safe with them." David was struggling with his own conflicted emotions. Every father's instinct told him to protect his daughter from danger, but what if the danger wasn't where he thought it was? What if trying to separate Maya from the bears would cause more harm than allowing this impossible relationship to continue? While the adults debated, something unexpected began to happen. Other animals were emerging from the forest, drawn by some invisible signal or instinct. A family of deer stepped delicately into the clearing, showing no fear of the bears or the humans. A pair of red foxes appeared next, followed by several raccoons and even a great horned owl that settled on a low branch directly overhead. "This is incredible," Dr. Williams breathed, raising her camera to document this unprecedented gathering. "It's like they're all drawn to witness what's happening here." Tom Morrison shook his head in disbelief. "In 30 years of forest management, I've never seen predator and prey species gathering peacefully like this. It's like the normal rules of nature have been suspended." But the most shocking arrival was yet to come. From the deepest part of the forest emerged an ancient female bear, so old that her once dark fur had turned silver gray. She moved slowly but with undeniable dignity, and when the other animals saw her, they all seemed to bow their heads in respect. Even Coda and Brutus reacted to the old bear's presence. They remained protectively positioned around Maya, but their posture shifted to one of deference and acknowledgement. This was clearly the matriarch of the bear community, a leader whose authority was absolute. The elderly bear approached the sleeping child slowly, her movements careful and deliberate. When she reached Maya, she lowered her massive head and gently sniffed the air around the little girl. Then, in a gesture that brought tears to several observers' eyes, she touched Maya's forehead with her nose, a bear's equivalent of a blessing. "My God," Officer Martinez whispered. "She's giving her approval. The pack leader is accepting the child as part of the bear community." Maya stirred in her sleep, sensing the presence of the new arrival. She opened her eyes and found herself looking directly into the wise, ancient eyes of the silver bear. Instead of being frightened, Maya smiled sleepily. "Hello, Grandma Bear," she said softly, somehow understanding the old bear's significance. "Are you here to meet me too?" The ancient bear made a sound unlike anything the humans had ever heard, a deep, melodious rumble that seemed to carry the wisdom of the centuries. It was a sound of acceptance, of blessing, of welcome into the family. Maya reached out her small hand and gently touched the silver bear's face. "You're very pretty," she said, "and very wise. I can see it in your eyes." Dr. Williams was frantically taking notes, trying to document every detail of this extraordinary encounter. "This is beyond unprecedented," she muttered. "This is magical. This is something that shouldn't be possible." But their peaceful moment was about to be shattered. The sound of helicopters echoed through the forest, growing louder by the second. Word of the situation had somehow reached the media, and news crews were arriving from across the region. Officer Martinez's radio crackled to life with urgent messages from his superiors. "Martinez, this is Chief Walker. We have reports of news helicopters heading to your location. I need a status update immediately. Is the child secure?" Martinez looked at Maya, still peacefully interacting with the ancient bear, while surrounded by her protective family. "Chief, the situation is complicated. The child is safe, but she's formed some kind of bond with the bears. Any attempt to extract her forcibly could be dangerous for everyone involved." "Martinez, we have media incoming. This situation cannot be allowed to escalate into a public spectacle. Extract the child immediately and neutralize the bear threat." "That's an order." The radio went silent, and Martinez felt the weight of an impossible choice. Follow orders and potentially destroy something miraculous, or disobey direct commands and risk his career. Maya, who had been listening to the radio conversation, looked up at the officer with tears forming in her eyes. "Please don't hurt my family," she pleaded. "I know you're a good person. I can see it in your heart." Those innocent words hit Martinez like a physical blow. This 3-year-old child, who should have been terrified and traumatized by her experience, was instead showing more compassion and wisdom than most adults. She was thinking not of her own safety, but of protecting the creatures who had cared for her. The helicopters were directly overhead now, their rotor wash creating small whirlwinds in the forest clearing. The noise was deafening, and all the wild animals except the bears began to scatter back into the woods. But Coda, Brutus, Nico, and the ancient silver bear remained steadfast, forming an even tighter protective circle around Maya. A news reporter's voice boomed down from one of the helicopters through a loudspeaker. "This is Channel 7 News. We can see a child surrounded by multiple bears. Emergency services, please confirm the status of the rescue operation." Maya looked up at the noisy machines with confusion and growing fear. "What are those loud things?" she asked Coda, pressing closer to the bear's warm side. "Are they going to hurt us?" For the first time since this whole adventure began, Coda showed signs of stress and agitation. The noise and chaos of the helicopters was triggering her fight-or-flight instincts, and she began to pace anxiously, torn between her desire to protect Maya and her need to escape the threatening sounds. Brutus was having an even stronger reaction. The massive bear rose to his full height and roared at the helicopters, a sound of rage and defiance that could be heard even over the rotor noise. He was interpreting the aircraft as aerial predators threatening his newly adopted family. "This is bad," Dr. Williams shouted over the noise. "The helicopters are stressing the bears. If we don't do something soon, their protective instincts could turn dangerous." Maya, sensing the growing tension in her bear family, stood up and walked to the center of the clearing. Despite the deafening noise and chaos around her, she cupped her small hands around her mouth and shouted as loudly as her little lungs could manage. "Stop! You're scaring my family!" Her voice was barely audible over the helicopter noise, but something about the sight of a tiny child standing fearlessly in the middle of a group of agitated bears gave everyone pause. The reporters in the helicopters began focusing their cameras on Maya, capturing footage that would soon be broadcast around the world. "Please go away," Maya continued shouting. "We're not hurting anyone. We just want to be together." Officer Martinez made a decision that would define the rest of his career. He pulled out his emergency flare gun and fired 3 red flares into the air, the universal signal for the helicopters to maintain distance and await further instructions. The helicopters backed off slightly, reducing the noise level enough for conversation to resume. But the damage had been done. The bears were now agitated and defensive, and Maya was starting to show signs of distress from all the chaos and shouting. "We need to get her out of here," David said urgently. "This situation is spiraling out of control." But when he took a step toward Maya, both Coda and Brutus immediately moved to block his path. The bears were no longer just protective. They were actively preventing any human from approaching their adopted cub. "Maya," Lynn called out desperately. "Sweetheart, come to Mommy. We need to leave this place. It's not safe anymore." Maya looked around at the chaos surrounding her, then back at her bear family. The ancient silver bear moved closer to her, offering comfort and reassurance with her presence. Maya made a decision that would change everything once again. "I'm not leaving," she announced with the stubborn determination that only a 3-year-old could possess. "This is my home now. These are my people. If you want me to come with you, you have to promise that my bear family can come too." "Maya, that's impossible," David said, his voice breaking with emotion. "Bears can't live with humans. They belong in the wild." "Then I belong in the wild too," Maya replied, crossing her arms defiantly. "Mama Bear taught me how to find berries and drink from streams. Big Bear protects me from danger. Baby Bear plays with me so I'm not lonely. And Grandma Bear gives me wisdom. They're better at taking care of me than anyone." The words cut through her parents' hearts like knives. Their daughter was telling them that she preferred the company of wild bears to her own family. But looking at the scene objectively, they couldn't deny that Maya seemed happier and more confident than they had ever seen her. Dr. Williams had been studying the situation intensively, and a wild idea was beginning to form in her mind. "What if there was a third option?" she said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her, hope and desperation clear in their eyes. "What if we didn't have to choose between separating them and keeping them together? What if we could create a situation where both families could coexist?" Officer Martinez frowned. "What are you suggesting?" "A wildlife preserve," Dr. Williams said, her excitement growing as she spoke. "A place where the bears could live in their natural habitat, but where Maya could visit them regularly, where researchers could study this unprecedented bond, and where both families could maintain their connection." "That's crazy," Tom Morrison said. "It would take years to establish something like that. We need a solution now." "Actually," Dr. Williams continued, "I know of a place. The Blackwood Research Station, about 50 miles from here. It's a wildlife observation facility that was closed due to budget cuts last year. The infrastructure is still there. Housing for researchers, enclosed observation areas, protected forest habitat. With the right funding and permissions, we could reopen it as a special preserve." Maya had been listening to this conversation with the intense focus that children reserve for discussions about their future. "Would I get to see my bear family every day?" she asked. "We could arrange regular visits, Doctor," Williams said carefully. "Maybe weekends, holidays, summer vacations. Your bear family would have hundreds of acres of protected forest, and you could spend time with them in a safe, controlled environment." "What about school?" Lynn asked, her practical mother's mind already working through the logistics. "Maya will need education, socialization with other children." "There are excellent schools in the area, Doctor," Williams replied. "And think about the educational opportunities this could provide. Maya could become the first human to truly understand bear communication and behavior. She could bridge the gap between our species in ways we've never imagined." But the most important opinion hadn't been heard yet. Maya looked around at her bear family, studying their faces as if trying to read their thoughts. Then she walked over to Coda and placed her small hand on the bear's massive paw. "Mama Bear, would you like to live in a special place where I could visit you all the time? Where you and Baby Bear and Big Bear and Grandma Bear could be safe, and where people would promise never to hurt you?" Coda looked down at the child who had changed her world, then around at her own family. Nico, Brutus, and the ancient matriarch who had given them all her blessing. Something passed between the bears, a communication that humans couldn't understand but could certainly feel. After a long moment, Coda gently nudged Maya back toward her human parents. But unlike before, there was no reluctance in the gesture. This time, it felt like a mother giving her permission for her child to explore new possibilities. "I think she likes the idea," Maya said, smiling through her tears. "But she wants to make sure I'll keep my promise to visit." David and Lynn looked at each other, both realizing that their lives were about to change in ways they never could have imagined. Their daughter had formed a bond with wild animals that defied explanation, and now they were being asked to restructure their entire existence around that bond. But looking at Maya's face, seeing the love and trust she shared with these magnificent creatures, they realized they didn't really have a choice. This wasn't just about keeping their family together. It was about honoring something sacred and unprecedented. "If we can make this work," David said slowly, If we can create this preserve and find a way for both our families to be happy, then we'll try." Maya's face lit up with pure joy, and she ran back and forth between her human parents and her bear family, hugging everyone with boundless enthusiasm. "Did you hear that?" she told the bears. "We're all going to live happily ever after, just like in the fairy tales." But as the helicopters continued to circle overhead and the complexity of the situation became clearer, everyone realized that creating this happily ever after would require more than good intentions. It would require a miracle of cooperation, understanding, and love that would test the limits of what humans and animals could achieve together. The real adventure was just beginning, and the challenges ahead would make everything they had already faced seem simple by comparison. But for the first time since this extraordinary day began, there was hope that love really could conquer all, even the ancient barriers between human and wild. As word of the unprecedented situation spread through social media and news networks, the forest clearing became the center of a global phenomenon that no one could have predicted. Within hours, the story of Maya and her bear family had captured the imagination of millions of people around the world. The hashtag #BearFamily was trending on every platform, and donations were pouring in from strangers who wanted to help make the wildlife preserve a reality. But the increased attention also brought new challenges and unexpected complications. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a renowned animal behaviorist from the International Wildlife Federation, had chartered a private helicopter and was now standing at the edge of the clearing, studying the scene with the intensity of a scientist observing a new species. "This is impossible, Doctor," Vasquez muttered, adjusting her thick-rimmed glasses as she watched Maya casually braiding flowers into Nico's fur while Brutus watched protectively. "Everything I know about bear psychology says this situation should have ended in tragedy hours ago." Dr. Williams approached her colleague with a mixture of excitement and defensiveness. "Elena, I've documented everything. The bond between this child and these bears is genuine, unprecedented, and absolutely remarkable." "Or absolutely dangerous?" Dr. Vasquez replied curtly. "Sarah, you're allowing your emotions to cloud your scientific judgment. These are wild animals, not teddy bears. The fact that they haven't harmed the child yet doesn't mean they won't. Bears are unpredictable, especially in stressful situations." Their argument was interrupted by a commotion near the tree line. A convoy of black SUVs had arrived, disgorging a team of federal wildlife agents led by Director James Harrison of the Fish and Wildlife Service. Harrison was a career bureaucrat known for his strict adherence to regulations and his zero-tolerance policy toward human-wildlife conflicts. "This circus ends now," Harrison announced, striding into the clearing with the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "I don't care what kind of Disney movie fantasy you people think you're living, but these are dangerous predators in close proximity to a human child. The bears will be tranquilized and relocated immediately." Maya looked up from where she was playing with Nico, her innocent eyes taking in the stern-faced man and the agents behind him carrying large tranquilizer rifles. "Are you here to hurt my family?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "We're here to protect you, little girl," Harrison said, his tone softening slightly when addressing Maya directly. "These animals are dangerous. They might seem friendly now, but they could turn violent at any moment." "No, they won't," Maya said with absolute certainty. "They love me, and I love them. Love doesn't hurt people." Harrison's expression hardened. "Officer Martinez, why haven't these animals been neutralized? You've had hours to resolve this situation." Officer Martinez stepped forward, his hand instinctively moving to rest on his weapon. "Sir," The situation is more complex than our initial reports indicated. The child appears to have formed a genuine bond with these bears, and any attempt to separate them forcibly could result in trauma for all parties involved. "I don't care about trauma," Harrison snapped. "I care about public safety and federal wildlife regulations. These bears represent a clear and present danger, and they will be dealt with accordingly." But as Harrison raised his hand to signal his agents to prepare their tranquilizer guns, something extraordinary happened. The ancient silver bear, who had been resting quietly at the edge of the clearing, slowly rose to her feet and began walking toward Harrison. Every agent immediately raised their weapons, but the old bear's approach was so calm, so deliberate, so completely non-threatening that even Harrison hesitated to give the order to fire. The silver bear walked directly up to the federal director and sat down in front of him, looking up into his eyes with an expression of such profound intelligence and dignity that it took his breath away. "Sir," one of the agents whispered, "should we take the shot?" Harrison found himself staring into the ancient bear's eyes, and what he saw there shook him to his core. There was no aggression, no threat, no wild fury. Instead, he saw wisdom, compassion, and something that looked disturbingly like pleading. The bear was asking him, begging him, to understand something that his regulations and protocols couldn't accommodate. Maya noticed the standoff and walked over to stand beside the silver bear, placing her small hand on the old matriarch's massive shoulder. "Grandma Bear wants to talk to you," she said simply. "She's trying to tell you that we're a family now, and families protect each other." "Bears don't talk," Harrison said weakly, but even as the words left his mouth, he felt their inadequacy. This bear was communicating more clearly than most humans he knew. Dr. Vasquez, who had been watching the encounter with growing amazement, slowly approached the unlikely pair. "Director Harrison, I need to revise my earlier assessment. What we're witnessing here isn't just unprecedented, it's revolutionary. This level of interspecies communication and bonding could change everything we know about animal consciousness and emotional capacity. It could also get someone killed," Harrison replied, but his conviction was wavering. Maya looked up at the director with those innocent eyes that had already worked their magic on so many others. "Mr. Important Man, why are you so scared? My bear family isn't scary. They're gentle and kind, and they just want to be loved. Don't you want to be loved too?" The question hit Harrison like a physical blow. This 3-year-old child had somehow identified the fear that drove his entire approach to wildlife management. The fear of the unknown, the fear of losing control, the fear of allowing emotion to override procedure. "Maya," Lin Chen called softly from where she stood with David, "come over here, sweetheart. Let the adults talk." But Maya shook her head firmly. "I need to help Grandma Bear explain. She's very wise, but she speaks bear language, not people language. I can translate." The absurdity of a toddler offering to translate for a wild bear might have been laughable in any other context, but everyone present had already witnessed too many impossible things to dismiss anything as ridiculous. Harrison found himself kneeling down to Maya's level, drawn by some force he couldn't understand or resist. "Okay, little translator, what is the bear trying to tell me?" Maya placed one hand on the silver bear's paw and looked seriously into Harrison's eyes. "Grandma Bear says that love is the strongest force in all the forests. She says that when love is real and true, it doesn't matter if you have fur or skin, if you walk on 2 legs or 4. She says that I belong to 2 families now, and both families will protect me forever." Harrison felt something crack inside his chest, some wall of cynicism and regulation that he had built up over decades of bureaucratic service. "And what does she want me to do?" "She wants you to give us a chance," Maya said simply. She wants you to trust that love can make impossible things possible. She promises that if you help us stay together, we'll show the whole world that different kinds of families can take care of each other. The federal director looked around the clearing, taking in the scene with new eyes. Maya sleeping peacefully between two massive bears. Nico playing gently with a human child. Brutus, the most feared bear in the region, standing guard over a toddler like a devoted father. And now, this ancient matriarch communicating through a 3-year-old translator, asking him to believe in something that defied every regulation in his handbook. "Director," Dr. Williams said quietly, "we have a proposal. A way to honor both the bond that's formed here and the safety concerns that you're rightfully raising." Harrison stood up slowly, never taking his eyes off the silver bear. "I'm listening." Dr. Williams outlined the wildlife preserve proposal again, but this time with more specific details. "The Blackwood Research Station has everything we need: secure facilities, protected habitat, research infrastructure. We could establish it as a special preserve dedicated to studying interspecies bonding and communication. Maya and her family could visit regularly, while the bears would have hundreds of acres of protected forest and round-the-clock veterinary care." "And the funding?" Harrison asked pragmatically. "Already pouring in," Dr. Williams replied, holding up her phone to show the donation counter that was climbing by the minute. "The story has gone viral globally. We've received pledges from wildlife organizations, private donors, even several governments that want to study this phenomenon. But their planning session was interrupted by a new development that changed everything once again. A Park Service truck was rumbling through the forest, and when it stopped at the edge of the clearing, out stepped Margaret Whitehorse, a tribal elder from the local Native American community. Margaret was in her 70s, her long silver hair braided with traditional beads, her weathered face carrying the wisdom of generations. She walked slowly but purposefully toward the group, her eyes fixed on the silver bear with recognition and something that looked like reverence. "You need to stop this," she said in a voice that carried absolute authority. "All of you. You're interfering with something sacred." Harrison turned to face this new arrival, his bureaucratic instincts immediately putting him on the defensive. "Ma'am, this is a federal wildlife situation. The tribal council doesn't have jurisdiction here." Margaret's laugh was rich and knowing. "White man's laws don't apply to matters of the spirit, Mr. Government Man. What's happening here is bigger than your regulations, bigger than your understanding, bigger than your fear." She approached the silver bear, who immediately rose and touched noses with the elderly native woman in a gesture of mutual respect and recognition. "Hello, old mother," Margaret whispered in her native tongue. "I wondered when you would choose to reveal yourself." Maya, who had been watching this exchange with fascination, tugged on Margaret's traditional dress. "Do you know Grandma Bear?" Margaret knelt down to Maya's level, studying the child's face with intense interest. "Child, do you know what you've done? Do you understand the gift you've been given?" "I made friends with a bear family," Maya said simply. "We love each other." "You've done much more than that," Margaret said softly. "In our old stories, there are legends of humans who could speak the language of all animals, who could bridge the gap between the human world and the wild world. We called them spirit walkers. Most people thought they were just myths." Margaret stood up and addressed the assembled crowd of officials, scientists, and media representatives. "This child is what our ancestors spoke of. She's a bridge between worlds, a translator of hearts. And that bear," she pointed to the silver matriarch, "she's been waiting her whole long life for this moment." "With all due respect," Dr. Vasquez interjected, "we're dealing with documented animal behavior here, not mystical legends." Margaret's eyes flashed with a mixture of amusement and pity. "Doctor, your science can tell you how, but can it tell you why? Can your studies explain why this particular child found this particular bear at this particular moment? Can your data account for the transformation we've witnessed in an aggressive male bear who suddenly became a protector?" The questions hung in the air, unanswered and perhaps unanswerable by conventional science. Maya, who had been listening to this conversation with the serious attention that children give to discussions about their own fate, suddenly walked to the center of the clearing. "Everyone is talking about me like I'm special," she said, her voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. "But I'm not special. I'm just me. The special thing is love. Love makes everything possible." She looked around at all the adults, the government officials with their regulations, the scientists with their theories, the tribal elder with her ancient wisdom. "You're all trying to understand with your heads," Maya continued, "but you need to understand with your hearts. My bear family doesn't love me because of science or legends or rules. They love me because love is what makes families." Maya walked back to where Coda was waiting and wrapped her small arms around the massive bear's neck. "Mama Bear, show them. Show them how love works." What happened next would be remembered as one of the most profound moments in the history of human-animal relationships. Coda slowly approached each person in the clearing: the federal agents, the scientists, the tribal elder, even the stern director Harrison. To each one, she offered the same gentle gesture, a soft touch of her nose to their hand, a moment of direct eye contact, a rumbling sound of peaceful greeting. It wasn't aggression or dominance or territorial marking. It was introduction. It was welcome. It was an invitation to understand that the barriers between species existed primarily in human minds, not in the hearts of creatures capable of love. When Coda touched Harrison's hand with her massive, gentle nose, the federal director felt something fundamental shift inside him. All his years of viewing wildlife as problems to be managed, threats to be contained, or resources to be protected suddenly seemed small and limited. This bear was treating him as an equal, as a fellow creature capable of understanding and compassion. "I don't believe this is happening," Harrison whispered, but his hand was already moving to gently stroke Coda's massive head. Margaret Whitehorse watched this transformation with satisfaction. "The old ways are not lost," she said quietly. "The bridge between worlds still exists. It just needed the right heart to find it again." But their moment of profound connection was about to be tested in ways none of them could have anticipated. From the sky came the sound of military helicopters, not news crews this time, but official government aircraft. Someone with serious authority had decided that this situation required federal intervention of the highest level. As the helicopters landed and uniformed personnel began emerging, Maya looked up at all the adults around her with a wisdom far beyond her 3 years. "The real test is coming now," she said simply. "Are you all going to help my family stay together, or are you going to let fear win?" The question would define not just the fate of Maya and her bear family, but the future of human-animal relationships around the world, and the answer would require more courage, more love, and more faith in the impossible than any of them had ever been asked to give. As the military helicopters touched down, kicking up dust and leaves in powerful whirlwinds, a figure emerged that made everyone's heart sink. General Patricia Stone, known throughout the federal system as the Iron Lady, stepped out wearing full military fatigues and an expression that could freeze fire. She was followed by a team of specialized wildlife containment experts, carrying equipment that looked more suited for warfare than animal management. "This unauthorized assembly is hereby terminated," General Stone announced through a megaphone. All civilians will evacuate immediately. The wildlife threats will be neutralized within the hour. Maya, hearing the harsh words and seeing the frightening equipment, did something that surprised everyone, including herself. Instead of running to her parents or hiding behind the bears, she walked directly toward the general with the fearless determination that had carried her through this entire adventure. "Ma'am, General Lady," Maya said, looking up at the imposing figure with innocent eyes. "Why do you want to hurt my family? What did they do wrong?" General Stone looked down at the tiny child who had just addressed her with perfect politeness, despite the circumstances. "Little girl, those are not your family. Those are dangerous wild animals that have somehow confused you into thinking they care about you. We're here to protect you." "But they do care about me," Maya said with absolute certainty. "And I care about them. That's what makes us family. Don't you have anyone who cares about you?" The question was so innocent, so purely curious, that it caught the general completely off guard. In her 30 years of military service, no one had ever asked her such a personal question in the middle of an operation. That's not relevant to this situation," General Stone stammered, momentarily losing her commanding composure. Maya tilted her small head thoughtfully. "I think it is relevant. I think maybe you've forgotten what love feels like, and that's why you're scared of it when you see it." Behind Maya, the ancient silver bear slowly rose to her full, majestic height. Margaret Whitehorse stepped forward, her weathered face calm but determined. "General Stone," Margaret said with quiet authority, "I invoke the sacred rights of my people under the Treaty of 1855. This land is within our traditional territory, and what's happening here is a matter of spiritual significance that falls under tribal jurisdiction. Native treaties don't override federal wildlife regulations," General Stone replied, but there was uncertainty in her voice. "Actually, they do," came a new voice from the edge of the clearing. Everyone turned to see a distinguished man in an expensive suit walking toward them, flanked by a team of lawyers carrying briefcases. "General Stone, I'm attorney David Richardson, representing the International Wildlife Protection League. We've filed emergency injunctions in federal court to prevent any interference with this unprecedented scientific discovery." The general's jaw tightened. "Mr. Richardson, this is a matter of public safety, not scientific research." "Then perhaps you should listen to the public," Richardson replied, holding up a tablet showing social media feeds. "The entire world is watching what happens here. There are protests forming in 50 major cities demanding protection for Maya and her bear family. The president's office has received over 2 million calls in the past hour." General Stone looked around the clearing, taking in the scene with military tactical awareness. She saw the bears, calm and protective around Maya. She saw the humans, united in their determination to protect this miraculous bond. She saw the media helicopters circling overhead, broadcasting everything to a global audience. And she saw Maya, a 3-year-old child standing fearlessly in the center of it all, radiating a love so pure and powerful that it had transformed everyone around her. "General," Maya said softly, walking closer and reaching out her small hand, "you don't have to be scared. I know you have a good heart underneath all that serious uniform. My bear family taught me that everyone has goodness inside them, even when they're trying to hide it." General Stone found herself looking down into Maya's trusting eyes, and something inside her military-hardened heart began to crack. This child, who should have been traumatized and terrified, was instead offering comfort to the very person who had come to separate her from everything she loved. "What would you have me do, child?" the general asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Maya smiled, the radiant expression that had captured hearts around the world. Help us. Help us show everyone that love is stronger than fear, that families come in all different shapes and sizes, and that magic happens when we choose to believe in it. The general looked around the clearing one more time. She saw Director Harrison, the federal bureaucrat, now sitting peacefully beside Brutus, the supposedly dangerous bear. She saw Dr. Williams documenting the impossible behaviors that were rewriting scientific understanding. She saw Officer Martinez, who had chosen compassion over protocol. She saw Margaret Whitehorse, whose ancient wisdom had revealed the spiritual significance of these events. And she saw Maya's parents, David and Lynn, who had found the courage to trust in something beyond their understanding, because they loved their daughter more than they feared the unknown. "Stand down," General Stone said quietly into her radio. "All teams, stand down and maintain perimeter only." "General, are you certain?" came the response from her command center. General Stone knelt down to Maya's level, and for the first time in decades, allowed her military facade to drop completely. "I'm certain," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Some things are more important than regulations." Maya threw her small arms around the general's neck in a spontaneous hug that brought tears to the eyes of everyone watching. "Thank you for choosing love," she whispered. In the months that followed, the Blackwood Research Station was reopened as the Maya Chen Interspecies Communications Center, funded by donations from around the world and supported by an unprecedented coalition of government agencies, scientific institutions, and tribal authorities. The facility became a place where the impossible happened daily, where the bonds between humans and animals were studied, celebrated, and nurtured. Maya spent her weekdays in school and her weekends at the center with her bear family. She learned to read not just books, but the subtle communications of creatures who had never been understood by humans before. Coda, Brutus, Nico, and the ancient silver matriarch became ambassadors for their species, teaching visitors that love truly knows no boundaries. Dr. Williams published research that revolutionized animal behavioral science, while Margaret Whitehorse served as the center's spiritual advisor, helping people understand that some bonds transcend scientific explanation. General Stone retired from the military and became the center's head of security, dedicated to protecting the magic she had almost destroyed. And Maya grew up knowing that she lived in a world where anything was possible, where love could bridge any gap, where families could be formed by choice rather than just by blood. She became living proof that sometimes the most profound truths are spoken by the smallest voices, and that the courage to love without limits can change the world. The ancient silver bear, whom Maya always called Grandma Bear, lived for 7 more years, far longer than anyone expected. On the day she finally passed peacefully in her sleep, Maya was holding her massive paw, whispering stories about all the wonderful things they had accomplished together. "Did I do good, Grandma Bear?" Maya asked, tears streaming down her now 10-year-old face. And as if in answer, a gentle breeze stirred through the forest, carrying with it the sound of wind chimes that seemed to say, "You did more than good, little spirit walker. You reminded the world how to love." Maya smiled through her tears, knowing that some bonds are so strong they transcend even death, and that the love she had discovered in a forest clearing would ripple outward through generations, touching hearts and changing lives in ways she could never fully imagine. The story of the mother bear who refused to leave a lone toddler in the forest had become a legend of love conquering fear, of innocence transforming hearts, and of the magical truth that families are not defined by species, but by the depth of caring that connects one soul to another. And in a world that often forgot how to believe in miracles, Maya and her bear family stood as eternal proof that love, indeed, makes all things possible.